Good evening, friends. Welcome once again to a presentation in the final events of Bible prophecy. Our topic tonight is In Search for the True Church. What a question that is, in search for the true church. What a quest that would be, to find out about the true church of God. Does God have a true church? Why is there so many denominations in our world today? That's the question that's asked by thousands of people around the world. Why so many denominations? You know, people choose a church today. They go to a church because maybe that church is a popular church. Everybody goes to the church, so I'll go to. Maybe they choose a church because, well, it's their family church. They've been born into that church. Maybe it's just a handy church. It's up around the corner. It's easy to get to. Maybe it's a huge church. Sometimes there's people in our world, they like going to what they call mega churches, where there's not just hundreds, but there's thousands of people. But friends, why should we choose a church? Why is there so many churches? Wouldn't it be easier if there was just one church? Today, people are totally confused as to know which church to join. People are totally confused at why there's so many religious movements around the world today. And they come to the conclusion, well, they think, well, look, there's so many churches, there's so many religions, there must be many paths, and there's one heaven, and we'll all get there in the end. You've probably heard that before. But friends, does God have a true church? Does God have many churches, or does he have a church? You know, Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 5 gives us a clue that God doesn't have hundreds of religions and hundreds of churches. It says in Ephesians 4 and verse 5 that there is one Lord, there is one faith, and there is one baptism. Is there a true church? If so, which one is it? Now, of course, friends, everybody believes that their church is the true church. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why would you be going to a church if you didn't think it was a true church? Why would you go to a church and say, I believe the church up the road is a true church, but I'm going to go here? If you knew there was a true church, you would go to that true church. And everybody believes their church is the true church. And tonight, friends, this lecture is going to be a challenge, not only to you, but also to me. Every one of us in this room tonight, we will be challenged. Let me assure you of that. Because we're going to find that God is raising up in these last days a people, and he calls them the remnant. Now, everybody believes their church is, of course, the true church. And you've probably come to the realization through this series of meetings that I myself am a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. Cornerstone Ministries is not a Seventh-day Adventist ministry in the sense that it's not supported by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but as a Christian, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, he's just going to tell us that his church is the true church. That's what you're thinking, isn't it, friends? You're thinking he's just going to tell us, well, his church is a true church, because that's why he goes there. But friends, listen to me tonight. It is not at this point so much an issue of being connected with a church, but an issue of being connected with Jesus Christ and the truth. Everything we have been covering in previous lectures is dealing with truth versus error. Truth versus error. Friends, tonight, first and foremost, God wants you to be connected to the truth, not just a church building. You know, too many make the mistake in our world today. They go to the church to find the truth. We don't go to the church to find the truth. Notice this statement on the screen. I like this. It says, as an eternal principle, you do not go to the church to find the truth. You go to the Bible to find the truth. And when you find the truth, you look for a church that teaches the truth. Doesn't that make sense, friends? Doesn't it make sense? You and I should go to the Bible to find the truth. And when you and I find the truth, then we should look for a church that teaches the truth. Because to be the true church of God, in our quest for the search for the true church, to be the true church of God, my friends, you must have a foundation of truth. Without the foundation of truth, you can't be the true church of God. It's as simple as that. 1 Timothy 3 verse 15 tells us very clearly about the true church. It says, the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. Friends, the foundation for being the true church of God, the church not of just God, but the living God, the church of the living God, my friends, has a foundation, and that foundation is the pillar and the ground of the truth. Friends, if you do not have the truth in your church, you're simply not the true church. Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that an honest thing to say? It's not a matter of how big your church is or how fantastic the worship is or how great the musicians or the preachers are. The foundation of the church of God is the pillar and the ground of the truth. Friends, there are good and bad in every church, including my own church. There's a rotten apple in every basket, isn't there? But the point of this lecture tonight, friends, the point of this lecture tonight is to reveal that God right now around this world is gathering together a people in these last days that will stand as a united front and be faithful to Jesus Christ. God is gathering today a people that are going to come together and stand as a united front against the beast and the mark of the beast and the powers of Satan. How? By living and upholding the truth. And friends, this lecture tonight is in no wise an attack against other churches or against other Christians. Every church around this world has faithful, God-fearing Christians that love the Lord. It's not an attack upon churches or upon Christians, but it is a challenge for every one of us tonight to come into line with the remnant church of God in these last days. And friends, as I've been stating night after night through this series of meetings, at the end it's going to be very easy. There will be but two groups. And at the end of time, friends, the Bible is going to show us tonight, there will be but two universal churches. Two churches. There isn't going to be hundreds. The whole world, friends, is going to polarize into one of two groups. And these two groups, these two churches, are found in the book of Revelation. One's found in Revelation 12, the other is found in Revelation chapter 17. And they're symbolized by women. You know, as you go into the Bible and you start studying Bible prophecy, you discover that a woman represents a church in Bible prophecy. In Revelation chapter 12, there's a delicate, comely woman. In Revelation chapter 17, there is a woman dressed like a harlot. She's called a whore. These represent two churches at the end of time. Now, before we go any further, let's just prove that a woman in Bible prophecy represents a church. You know, Jesus Christ himself, as he walked the earth, he often referred to himself as the bridegroom and his people as the bride. His church was the bride, the woman. In Jeremiah chapter 6 and verse 2, it says, I have likened Zion to a comely and delicate woman. So Zion is like a comely and delicate woman. Now, of course, who is Zion? Zion is the church, God's people. Isaiah 51 verse 16 tells us that. Zion, thou art my people. So the church is like a comely and a delicate woman. It's God's bride. And this church is symbolized by a woman. Yeah, in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 2, Paul said something very interesting to the church at Corinth. He said this, For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. He's saying to the church at Corinth, I've espoused you to one husband, that's Jesus Christ. I want you to be a pure bride. You see, friends, the woman represents the church. Revelation chapter 19, verse 7 and 8 also gives us a clue about the woman being the bride of Christ in the church of God. Revelation 19, 7 and 8, it says, For the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white. For the fine linen is the righteousness of saints. Here we find that the Lamb, Jesus Christ, is getting married, and his wife has made herself ready. Herself, it's a woman obviously. And who is the woman? It's the saints. That's God's church, friends. A woman in Bible prophecy is very clearly represented a church, represents a church. Now in Revelation we have two women. Two women are brought to view. Two churches. One is a faithful woman, one is a harlot woman. We are going to identify both of these churches tonight. As I said, there will be two churches at the end. It's going to be real easy for you and I to choose. Two universal movements taking place in the world. We are now going to identify the first woman, and we're going to work on, for a start, the one found in Revelation chapter 17, the harlot church. Revelation chapter 17, verses 1 to 5, it describes this woman for us. Revelation chapter 17, beginning in verse 1, the Bible reads, And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So here we see this woman, this church that's being brought to view. The Bible tells us she's dressed in purple and scarlet. She's decked out with gold and jewels and pearls. The Bible says she's a whore. And the Bible says she's got this golden cup in her hand, and she's dishing out the wine from that cup to the world. Now, what is the name of this false church? What name does the Bible give to this false church? Notice now verse 5, Revelation 17 verse 5. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Notice, my friends, tonight the Bible tells you and I that the name of this false church is what? Mystery Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. This is the great system of the mystery system of Babylon. Now, what is the attitude? What is the attitude of this false church towards the true church? Let's look now in verse 6, Revelation 17 verse 6. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Here we find this false church has been drunken with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. In other words, this church persecutes the true church of God. It's a persecuting church. Now, of course, the question we've got to ask ourselves, friends, is simply this. Who is this false church of Revelation chapter 17? Well, friends, you and I, we all know who this church is. We have covered this in our previous lectures. It's none other than the Roman Catholic Church. Not the people, but the system. We have shown in previous lectures at least 13 identifying marks that tell us that this is the system, the great Antichrist system of Bible prophecy. And here in Revelation chapter 17, God is just giving us more identifying marks of who this power is. Notice a few of these points that we've been through in Revelation 17 verses 1 to 5. The first point was that this system, this church, is arrayed in purple and scarlet. You know, friends, some of the chief colours of the papacy is what? It's purple and scarlet, isn't it? The second point was that this system, this church, was decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. You know, one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest system in the world today is the Roman Catholic system. The wealth of the Vatican is enormous, and some experts say in terms of finance that she is the most powerful in the world, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. The third point we learnt there in Revelation 17 verses 1 to 5 is that this will be a universal church. The word Catholic actually means universal. The reason why it has to be a universal church is because back there in verse 2 of Revelation 17, it says that the kings and the whole world is drunk with her wine. It's a worldwide system affecting the entire world. They're drunk with the wine that comes out of the golden cup. Another point we saw there, point 4, was that this system was drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. And we've covered in our previous lectures, we have seen in our previous nights that between 50 and 150 million people have been put to death as a result of this system, particularly through the Dark Ages. Thousands upon thousands have lost their life. She's drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus, friends. The next point is a very interesting one. Point number 5 here of one of our identifying marks that Revelation 17 gave us. It tells us that this system had a name, and the name was Mystery Babylon the Great. She is called, point 5, she is called Babylon the Great. Now, how does the name Babylon the Great fit into the Roman system? Mystery Babylon the Great. When one studies the symbology of ancient Babylon, we find that the Roman system is just a continuation of the ancient pagan world of Babylon. and the ancient pagan world at large. Many years ago there was a man, Dr. Alexander Hislop, and he wrote a book called The Two Babylons. And in that book he says this, summarising the whole point. Now in the book The Two Babylons, what he is doing, he's comparing ancient Babylon and the ancient pagan world, and he's showing that modern Babylon, the Roman system, the Roman church, is exactly the same. Notice this statement from his book on pages 2 and 3. He says that the paganism which Rome has baptized is, in all its essential features, the very paganism which prevailed in the ancient Babylon. The essential character of her system, the grand objects of her worship, her festivals, her doctrine and discipline, her rites and ceremonies, her priesthood and their orders have all been derived from ancient Babylon. And you know, friends, when you and I look at the artwork, at the dress, at the imagery that we see in the Roman system, Alexander Hislop was exactly right, because what takes place in the church today, it all stems from ancient Babylon and the ancient pagan world. This is why, friends, it's called Babylon the Great. It's really a continuation of the same system. For example, I want to give you a few examples tonight before we go past this point. If we go into the ancient world, we find the sun god was a big god. If you go into the imagery and the architecture of the ancient world, we find that there was sun symbols all through it. On the screen, we're going to compare different parts of ancient Babylon now with modern Babylon and show how they're exactly the same. For example, on the screen, we find here some pictures of the ancient gods, sun gods in the ancient world. But friends, when you and I now go into the modern Babylon, the Roman system, we find through its artwork and architecture the same sun symbols. For example, on the screen there's a sun with a face. This sun face is huge and it's above the pulpit in a Scandinavian church. We find here the sunburst dome, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now many of these big domes that were placed on top of the cathedrals and churches were designed to be like a sunburst, because from the ancient world the worship of the sun was one of the main gods. We find now in modern Babylon the same imagery, the sun imagery comes right through. You notice on the screen here this picture of, which is an amazing picture really, a picture of the woman, and she's nestling not Jesus Christ, but she's nestling a literal sun. You see, friends, the system is all revolving around sun worship and nature worship and the pagan rites of the ancient world. Here we have the woman, the church, but not nestling Jesus Christ, the Saviour of the world. She's nestling in her bosom a sun god. On the other side of that screen is another picture of sun worship. Here we find a picture of St. Peter's throne in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And if you notice this massive throne, it's revolved around basically the setting of the sun. It's a sun throne. Here we see a picture of the Pope's coat of arms. It's a sun symbol, same as in the ancient world. Here we find a statue. It's called the Golden Child. It's in the Vatican Treasury at Rome. What's it got? It's a sunburst. It's a sun symbol. Here we find on the screen a picture that's very interesting. If you look very closely at this picture, you'll find this photo of the papal palace with the Pope at the window of his apartment. If you look along the top of the building, right at the top of the photograph, you'll notice the decorative work above the window is full of sun symbols, sun images. Another point that is very interesting also in comparing ancient Babylon with modern Babylon, if you look at the picture on the screen here and look at it very closely, you'll see it's a stone laver from ancient Assyria, which is now in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. Carved on its sides are depictions of pagan priests that appear to be half sunfish and half man that are sprinkling holy water. In the ancient world, the fish god was a big thing. Now, part of the fish god attire was the fish mitre. You notice here on the screen also another picture of Dagon, the fish god, and other pagan gods in fish attire. They would wear this fish attire, as it were, and part of the symbolic language of it all was the fish head mitre. And as you go now into the papacy, you find something very interesting. If you look at what the high officials of the Catholic Church wear, they wear these funny sort of hats, which are actually fish head mitres, which are exactly the same as come from the ancient pagan world. Nothing's changed. Here we see on the screen pagan-type croziers, supposed to be sort of shepherd staffs, as it were. In the pagan world, they were right through the pagan world. Of course, if you go into the modern Babylon, you find the same croziers are used today. In fact, serpent croziers were commonly carried by bishops and high Catholic officials in the Middle Ages. They had serpents on them. Here we see on the screen a picture of the Assyrian god, one of the Assyrian gods, and you'll notice if you look very closely, in the hand of this Assyrian god is a picture of a pine cone. He's holding a pine cone. Here you'll see another picture of a Babylonian god holding a pine cone in the same way. The idea of this was to keep away the evil spirits. If you go into Egypt, we see the pine cone staff of Osiris. If we go into the Hindu world, the Hindu images carried pine cones. Here we see on the screen a picture of a hand from a pagan sun-worshipping cult. And if you look closely at this hand, you find on the thumb of the hand is what? Is a pine cone. Mexican gods had pine cones, which was a symbol of the sun and rebirth and fertility. But the largest pine cone in the world is actually found in the court of the pine cone at the Vatican. It's an enormous statue of a pine cone. The same imagery that's in the pagan world, we find now in modern Babylon, that just as Dr. Alexander Hislop said, right through the whole system. On the screen there's a photograph there of the Pope. If you look very closely at the staff that he is holding, you find beneath the cross of Christ is a pine cone. There's some more photographs there of the pine cone, another Pope and another picture of the pine cone, through the symbolic language and imagery of the Roman system. This is a statue of the Pope here, one of the older popes. It's a bit hard to see, but if you look closely on his chest, you'll notice that there are 3 pine cones. The same as it was in ancient Babylon is the same as it is now in modern Babylon. In the ancient world, they used to carry around their gods on thrones. Their gods were their kings and their queens and their pharaohs. And they would display them and they would carry them around on thrones, as the picture on the screen shows you. And of course, we see in modern Babylon, the Pope gets carried around exactly the same. Not just as a man, but gets carried around as if he were a god. Another point that's interesting, if you look at the screen there, you'll notice some ancient pagan prayer beads. They used to use these in the pagan world, but of course we come into the modern Babylon, we find the same prayer beads are being used. They're called rosary beads in the Catholic system. They were in ancient Babylon, and now we find them in modern Babylon, exactly the same. On the screen there's a photograph there. Take a close look at that photograph. On the tiara of this Babylonian winged god, there is what is known as a fleur-de-lis. It's that little knob thing on top of the picture there. We find this same symbol right through again, through the modern Babylonian world. On the picture there is on the screen there's a picture from the Vatican. If you look very closely in the middle of that bit of artwork there is the same symbols of fleur-de-lis right there in the Vatican as well. On the screen there's some more pictures there about the tiara. You know, the Pope wears a triple crowned or a triple mitred tiara. The triple part means that he's ruler of heaven and the earth and the lower regions. But in the ancient world, the ancient pagan gods wore a triple-crowned tiara as well. On the screen again, there's another symbol there, a photograph of some symbols at least, of ancient pagan sun symbols. If you look closely, you'll see these different pagan sun symbols were usually a circle with some sort of shape of a cross in the middle. If you look closely at those sun symbols on the screen and then look at the next picture of the papacy and the Pope with his Mass, it's the exact same sun symbols on the front of the altar of this picture. If you look at the Pope's mitre here very closely, right in the centre, we see the exact same sun symbol on the mitre of the Pope. In the ancient world we saw it, in the modern world of Babylon we see the same thing. Now look very closely at this next picture. This next picture is very interesting. This next picture is a depiction of the pagan kings on an ancient standing stone, and it shows a strip of cloth called a laplet that hangs from the rear of the headgear of the king. or the god. Can you notice that little bit of laplet, that bit of cloth that hangs from the back? If you look also very closely at this image, on its hand there is a symbol of the sun, a sun symbol on the hand on this image as well. Now there's a laplet and there's an image of the sun on the hand of this Babylonian god here. Now have a look at these next pictures. On the Pope's mitre and the Pope's tiara are the same laplets, the same bit of cloth that comes off the back as it was on these ancient pagan gods. And also notice a picture on here on the screen of this the Pope here. He has his tiara on, he has his laplets coming off the back, but notice on his hand it's the exact same sun symbol that was on that ancient standing stone of the pagan Babylonian god. The exact same imagery, friends, is going right through the system. Here we see another photograph of the fish head mitres. All of those fish head mitres have that same cloth, that laplet that comes off the back of those mitres. Notice also the picture of the Pope on the screen there with his mitre. And on his collar, you'll notice on his collar, there's a symbol there. It's like a cross that's flared out at the ends to make a circle. This same picture is seen in the ancient Babylonian world. Notice also this picture here of this Neo-Assyrian standing stone. This dates from about 824 BC, and it depicts a king. And notice the necklace that he is wearing around his neck. It's the exact same image that we just saw on the Pope's necklace, the Pope's collar. It's the picture of a cross-type image, but the cross flares out at the ends so it can make it into a circle. And if we look at the next photographs, we see the exact same image on the Pope and also on this priest as we saw on this ancient pagan king. What about sun discs? You know, when you look at the artwork of the Catholic system, for some reason they always have like this halo or this sun disc behind their head. That's what it is. It's a sun disc. It's not a halo. There's nowhere in the Bible that talks about the apostles or Jesus or Mary or anybody else walking around with halos over their head. In the ancient world, it was a symbol of the sun god. And we find all the artwork has these halos or these sun discs behind the heads of the so-called saints in Jesus. In the ancient world, pagan solar wheels were a very big thing. And you look at the Catholic system today, and we look in our world today, and the largest solar wheel in the world is in the court of the Vatican. If you look closely at those photographs, you'll see the entire court of the Vatican is one enormous solar wheel. Friends, it's all from pagan origin. It's all from ancient Babylon, and it's come into the church today, has been so-called Christianized. But friends, that's why the Bible says that this system is called Babylon the Great, because it's a continuation of the same system of Babylon. On the screen there we find an Egyptian obelisk. Of course, in St. Peter's Square, in the middle of that great big solar wheel, we find an obelisk as well. These are all pagan symbols, friends. I mean, I could go on for another hour on all these different symbols. But friends, this system is none other than Babylon the Great. God is identifying to you and I clearer and clearer and clearer evidence that this system is the one that he is identifying and is warning us to stay away from. The sixth point from Revelation chapter 17 is that this system is the mother of harlots. You know, friends, the Roman Catholic Church is the only church that calls herself the mother. She calls herself the mother church. The reason why she calls herself the mother church is because most of, if not all of, the Protestant denominations broke off from the Roman system, and she calls them her daughters. Disobedient daughters, but they're nevertheless her daughters. She is called the mother. But the Bible calls this system Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Why is she called the mother of harlots? I mean, if she's a mother, we've got to ask ourselves, well, who are the daughters? If the mother is a church, obviously the daughters must somewhere, somehow be churches as well. Wouldn't that make sense? Her daughters, friends, she is the mother, but her daughters are those churches who are still holding on to her teachings and her doctrines. They are still drinking from the golden cup that she's dishing up to the world. And this, my friends, classes them as the daughters of Babylon. And you must ask yourself tonight, well, is my church holding on to the doctrines that were forged in Babylon, and is my church therefore by default a daughter of Babylon? You see, friends, the word Babylon simply means confusion. It comes from the ancient Tower of Babel. In the ancient Tower of Babel, they decided to start their own religion, and God confounded the languages. The ancient Tower of Babel was the foundation for the system of Babylon, and that word Babel means confusion. Babylon means confusion. And today, friends, as we look at our world today, our churches, we are finding that the world and the churches of the world, they are confused, and the reason why they are confused is because they are drunk. Remember Revelation chapter 17 verse 2, the Bible told us there that the world was drunk. Notice this verse again, Revelation 17 verse 2. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. You see, friends, this church has a golden cup. It's full of wine. The Bible's telling us that the inhabitants of the world, the kings of the world, they've been made drunk because she's been dishing up the wine and the world has been drinking it. Now, of course, we've got to ask ourselves the question, what is the wine? What is the wine that's coming from the golden cup that's causing confusion, that's causing Babylon and confusing the world? What does the wine represent? Now, if you look at what the wine represents, we find the wine represents its teachings and its doctrines. And we go back to the story of Jesus Christ, when Jesus Christ was, just before he was crucified, the night before, he instituted what we call the Last Supper. In the Last Supper, something interesting takes place. Notice Matthew 26, verse 27 to 28. And he, Jesus, took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them, the disciples, saying, Drink ye all of it, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. At the Last Supper, he takes that cup. He takes the cup, he says to the disciples, Drink ye all of it, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. And he hands that cup to the disciples. He said, drink all of it. Don't drink half. Don't sip at it. Drink ye all of the cup. You know, friends, that cup represents the cup of salvation. In that cup, symbolically speaking, was the teachings and the doctrines and the plan of salvation that Jesus Christ was offering to the world. And he says to the world, take the cup and drink ye all of it. But what takes place in our world today, friends, is many drink from the cup of Christ, but they just sip the cup. And they go to Babylon and they sip the cup of Babylon, and they're confused. The churches of our world are confused because they're drinking from two cups. You know, the Bible tells us in Psalm 116 verse 13, it says, I will take the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. Friends, God wants us to take the cup of salvation. He wants us to drink all of it. That cup of salvation is his teachings, his doctrines, his truth, his plan of salvation. But the Bible also tells us that the devil has a cup. The devil has a cup as well. In 1 Corinthians 10 verse 21, notice what the Bible says here. It says, Ye cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. Ye cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils. You see, friends, too many in our world today in the Christian churches, they're partaking of the cup of the Lord, but they're partaking of the cup of devils as well. They're sipping from Babylon and they're sipping from the Lord, but the Lord says, take the cup of salvation and drink ye all of that cup. And because they're sipping from the cup of Babylon, they're drunk with her wine, her teachings, her false doctrines, and there is confusion in the church. There is confusion in the world, and many churches today are referred to as the daughters of Babylon because, friends, they're drinking from the wrong cup. They're drinking from Babylon's doctrines. They're holding on to the doctrines of Babylon or the Roman system. They've never fully broken away from the apostasy and the falsehood that was forged in the Roman Catholic Church, and therefore they are still classed as daughters with Babylon. Therefore, we have confusion in our Christian world. You know, friends, there's confusion in our Christian world tonight, isn't there? If you were to go to different churches and to ask them what they believe, what is their cup, There's all these sorts of cups, there's all these doctrines, all these truths so-called all over the place. They're all different. Have you noticed that, friend? Have you noticed the confusion in this system today? But God has a plan. God has a plan tonight, my friend, and that plan and that message is to dispel the confusion, to dispel the darkness, and that message is found in Revelation chapter 14. It is the three angels' messages. We've been going through that message night after night in different avenues. Let's look at that message again tonight, because this message has been designed by God to call His people back to the right cup of salvation. Revelation 14 verse 6, the Bible says, "And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven," this is the first angel's message, "having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people." Verse 7, "saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come, and worship Him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters." Here is a call to the world and to the people of God scattered through Babylon. It's a call to preach the three angels' messages. It's a call to preach the everlasting gospel. Not a gospel, but the everlasting gospel. Friends, there's only one. It's a call to come back to the worship of the Creator God. A call to come back to the memorial of creation, the Sabbath. It's a call to the Christian world that judgment has begun. We saw that last night. It's a call to come back to obedience to the law of God. The second angel's message in Revelation 14 verse 8 says this, "And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." The call of the second angel's message to the churches around this world today and to the people of God in Babylon is a call to separate themselves from Babylon, from the confusion, from the darkness, from the corruption of false religion. It's a call to have no part with apostasy. It's a call to have no part with anything that will distort the gospel of Christ or obscure the truth as it's found in Jesus Christ. It's a call to leave the false teachings and expose the false teachings of this corrupt system called Babylon. And of course, the third angel's message, we know it so well. Revelation 14 verse 9 and 10. "And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God." Here is that famous message going to the world. It's exposing who the beast is. And of course, we've seen in our previous lectures that this beast power is the Antichrist of Bible prophecy, which is the Roman system. It's a warning to the world about the mark of the beast, which is Sunday and Sunday legislation. And according to Revelation 14 verse 8, friends, God's message today for every one of us is to come out from fallen Babylon, to leave the falsehood behind, to leave the false doctrines behind, to come back to the pillar and the ground of truth, back to the Word of God, and not to the traditions of men. Sola Scriptura is to be the foundation of our faith, not the teachings of man. And the warning of Revelation 14 is repeated in Revelation 18 verse 2. "And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people." The good news tonight, friends, is this, that God has His people in Babylon. He has His people through the entire Christian denominations of this world. But the call of God tonight, friends, in the last hour of this earth's history, is to come out of her, my people. Leave the falsehood. Leave the false doctrines. Stop drinking from the wrong cup and take the cup of salvation and drink ye all of it, Jesus said. That, my friend, is the call of God to our hearts tonight. God is calling His people to come back to Him, to come out of fallen churches, out of confusion, out of falsehood. But friends, when God calls you out, when He's calling all of us out, guess what God does? He also calls us in. Into what? Friends, He's calling us into the true church of God. We have now identified the first church of Revelation, the false church. We are now going to identify the true church, because God's calling us out of error, but friends, He's calling you and I to come into truth. He has a people. God has always had a people on this earth. He has always had a church with truth on this earth. And that true church tonight is represented in Revelation chapter 12 as the delicate, comely woman, the bride of Christ. What we have seen in Revelation 12, or will see in Revelation 12, is a brief history of the Christian church from the time of Jesus Christ right down to the day which we live. Let's now go to Revelation chapter 12, and let's read verses 1 to 5 in that chapter and find out about the true church of God, His bride, His woman. Revelation 12, verse 1, the Bible reads, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars." Verse 2, "And she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered." Verse 3, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads." Verse 4, "And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born." And verse 5, "And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to His throne." Here we see the church of God, the pure church, the pure apostolic church of the times of Christ. In this chapter we've seen so far some symbolic language. First of all, the woman we know is the church, isn't that right? But what about the dragon? Who is the dragon that appears in Revelation chapter 12, 1 to 5? Who is the dragon? Well, friends, we know who the dragon is, don't we? Revelation chapter 12, verse 9 tells us the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So here we have the woman. We have the church, of course. We have the dragon, Satan, who is waiting for this woman to bring forth this child so he can destroy the child, the man-child. Now, of course, we have to ask, well, who is the man-child? The man-child, friends, is Jesus Christ. How do we know that it's Jesus Christ? There are 2 points in Revelation chapter 12, verse 5, that help us identify Jesus Christ as this man-child that the church is going to bring forth. Notice verse 5 again, Revelation 12, verse 5. "And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to His throne." There's 2 particular points here about this man-child that we can use to identify who it is. The first one is that this man-child will rule all nations with a rod of iron. Friends, that refers to Jesus Christ. Notice Revelation chapter 19, verse 15, talking about Christ. He comes on a white horse. He comes as a conqueror, as victorious. The Bible says in Revelation 19, verse 15, "And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron." This is talking about in the future. It's talking about Jesus Christ, and it says he will rule with what? A rod of iron, same as the man-child of Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12, verse 5 also said that this man-child would be caught up unto God and to His throne. The only one caught up to God's throne and that will rule all nations with a rod of iron is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, He was the one that was caught up eventually to God and to His throne. Ephesians 1 verse 20 tells us that God raised Him from the dead and set Him at His own right hand in the heavenly places. Jesus Christ ascended from this earth to His Father, to His right hand. So friends, the man-child must be Jesus Christ. So here we have the woman, the church. She's bringing forth the man-child, Jesus Christ. The dragon, Satan, is there to destroy the man-child as soon as he's born, Jesus. How did Satan try and destroy Jesus Christ as soon as he was born? At the time of Christ's birth, Satan was working through the pagan Roman Empire, And Satan influenced Herod, a ruler under Rome, to try and murder all the babies of Bethlehem, hoping that he would do what? Kill Jesus Christ as well. But Jesus Christ was warned. Joseph was warned by an angel in a dream to get out and go down to Egypt. Satan tried to destroy Jesus Christ as soon as he was born, but he failed. He tried right through his ministry, but Satan failed to destroy him. What happened after Jesus Christ ascended to heaven and left this earth? When Jesus was here, Satan persecuted Jesus Christ relentlessly. He tempted him. But after Jesus was gone, what could Satan do? Jesus is gone. Satan can't tempt Jesus Christ anymore. He couldn't try to get him to fall. He couldn't persecute him. So what did Satan do after Jesus was beyond his reach in heaven? He couldn't attack him anymore. So who did he attack? You know, if you're a pretty corrupt sort of a person and you want to hurt somebody and you can't get to them, the best way to hurt them is to do what? Is to hurt those who they love. The best thing for Satan to do, and which is what he did do, he couldn't get to Jesus Christ, so he thought, I'll attack his bride. I will attack his church. And that's exactly what Satan did. Notice what happens now when he's ascended to heaven. Notice now, Revelation chapter 13 again, chapter 12, looking at verse 13. It says, the dragon persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Jesus Christ is born into this world. He comes to the church. He goes back to heaven. Now Satan can't attack Jesus, so he attacks who? He attacks the woman. He persecutes the woman. He persecutes the church. You know, friends, when Jesus left this world, before he left, he told his disciples, there's going to be persecution. If they've killed me, the Son of God, they're going to persecute you. And friends, that's exactly what took place. Satan could no longer vent his hatred on Jesus Christ because he was gone. So he decided to hurt Jesus Christ by taking it out on his church. He tried to crush out the early Christian church, to destroy that church. He thought, if I can destroy this church, there is no church, there is no bride. I will win the battle. And as we go into history, friends, we find some very solemn things take place. In the early centuries AD, particularly through the Roman Empire, the Roman pagan empire, the Christians were persecuted mercilessly. Thousands were killed for their faith. All but one of Christ's disciples died a martyr's death. Paul, the great apostle Paul, was beheaded outside the walls of Jerusalem. Thousands of Christians were tortured. They were thrown in dungeons. They sealed their testimony with their own blood. They were thrown to the lions in the Colosseum. You know, many of them were brought before pagan altars, and they were told, if you will take a pinch of incense and place it on that pagan altar, you can live. But friends, these people, these early disciples, they loved God so faithfully and so surely that they would not even take a pinch of incense and place it on a pagan altar, knowing that they were worshipping another God. The Bible says they loved not their lives unto the death. And Satan began to realize something as persecution took place. The more he persecuted, the more Christians seemed to arise. One historian said the blood of the martyrs was like seed. They would kill one and two popped up in his place. They would kill the two, then there seemed to be four. They'd kill the four, then there seemed to be 8. Satan began to realize the more that they killed, the more that they martyred, their testimony was converting others and the church was exploding, so he changed his tactics. He changed his tactics. Instead of trying to just blot out the Christian church, he decided he would have his own form of Christianity. He would have his own church. It would cause confusion. He would still persecute people, the people of God, but he would confuse many with false doctrines, false religion, false wine, the false cup of salvation. And the persecution continued after the Roman Empire disappeared and was transformed into the papal Roman Empire. The persecution continued, where thousands were burnt at the stakes. They were tortured, they were martyred, simply for having the Word of God in their home, simply for saying we want to follow God according to the dictates of our own conscience. The persecution continued for century after century. Now, what did the church, the true church of God, do during this time of persecution? And how long was this persecution to last? We find in Revelation chapter 12 again in verse 6 something very interesting. Notice this verse. It says, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, and they should feed her there 1,260 days." Here we find the church of God. Satan persecutes the church. It flees into the wilderness, where it's looked after, as it were, for 1,260 days. Now, friends, 1,260 days, or 1,260 days, or as we've learned in previous lectures, 1,260 years, is the exact same time period that the papacy ruled through the Dark Ages. That's the same number, 1,260 days or years, has come up in other prophecies. Now we find the church of God flees into the wilderness for protection for the same 1,260 years. Remember this chart, we've seen it before on the screen. The 1,260 years of papal supremacy. Remember back there in 538, the Ostrogoths, they were overthrown. 1,260 years brought us to the year 1798 when Pope Pius VI was imprisoned by Napoleon. There was that 1,260 years of papal supremacy that Satan tried to blot out the true Christian faith. And the way that the Christian church survived was by going into, as the Bible says, the wilderness. The true church of God fled into the wilderness, into the remote places of the earth, to hide from her enemies. And friends, it's a well-known historical fact that during the Dark Ages, God's people fled to the caves, to the solitary places of the earth. And they kept alive there in the wilderness the true Christian faith. There was the Waldenses and the Albigenses in the Piedmont valleys. The Huguenots all over France and Bohemia. Other faithful Christians fled to the Alps of northern Italy and southern France. And they settled in secluded valleys and caves and in remote mountain places. And there the truth of God was kept alive. As Satan the dragon persecuted the church, the truth was kept alive in the wilderness. A tremendous example of this is the Bible-believing Waldensians. Up there in the Piedmont valleys of Italy, they were hidden away. Crusade after crusade was sent up there to wipe them out, but the strong fortress of the wilderness was their defense. For years, for centuries, they lived there, hidden away in Waldensian mountain villages. There they would hand copy the Bible. They would write the Bible out by hand. And on the screen there's a picture of original Bible copyist table. They would spend hours writing out portions of the scriptures. They would send missionaries down into the world. They would go as peddlers selling wares. And when they had opportunity, they would pull out some of the scriptures that they'd written. They'd try and pass it on to shed light to those who were living in darkness. Because back in those days, if you had a Bible, that was heresy. And you were burnt at the stake. And many of these people, they lived in darkness. They didn't have the Word of God. And these Waldensians would try and shed the light with these sad, confused souls. Many of those missionaries would go down to those valleys and they would never come back. They tried to keep alive the truth. And friends, what took place here is in the wilderness for 1,260 years, we find God keeps alive the true church. But as we come to the end of the 1,260 years, as the papacy was wounded, that deadly wound, as the church now begins to come out of the wilderness, we find the true church of God come to view. The remnant church of God, the church that will stand in these last days against the false system, against the wine of Babylon, against the mark of the beast, against the Antichrist power. It comes to view after the year 1798, when the church now emerges from the wilderness because the persecution has stopped. Notice what verse 17, Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, says about now this remnant church. Revelation 12, verse 17, a powerful text of Scripture. It reads as follows: "And the dragon," Satan in other words, "was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." Here we see, friends, for 1260 years Satan tries to destroy the true church. He hasn't succeeded. After 1798, he's just wroth with the church. He still hasn't been able to stamp the church out. And now there is a remnant church. He is wroth with this church. And the Bible tells us a couple of identifying points here of who this church is. The Bible says that she keeps the commandments of God and she has the testimony of Jesus. Here we see, friends, God's remnant church coming to view after 1798. Two identifying points. They keep the commandments of God. They are a remnant and they have the testimony of Jesus. Well, what is the testimony of Jesus? Once again, if we compare Scripture with Scripture, in Revelation chapter 19 verse 10, it tells us what the testimony of Jesus is. Revelation 19 verse 10. "For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy." In other words, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, or the gift of prophecy. This remnant church would have the gift of prophecy as a guiding light in that church. It would be a remnant people. You know, friends, Satan hates the remnant church. He hates the end time people of God because they are the ones that will stand in contrast to the great counterfeit church that he has set up in these last days, of which we have learnt in the very near future the entire world is going to worship. Wouldn't you hate the remnant church as well? When your whole plan is set to go and there's this group of people that God has raised up and given them truth and they are standing in your way. Wouldn't you try and blot them out? Well, friends, that's exactly what Satan is trying to do right now. He's trying to destroy the remnant people of God. So who is the remnant church that God has raised up to stand up against Babylon and her daughters and her confusion? First of all, what is a remnant? What is a remnant? You know, if you go to the carpet shop, like I did just a little while ago, and you're looking for a small piece of carpet, they call it a remnant. I went to the carpet shop and I said, I want a couple of meters of carpet. And he said to me, there's some remnant rolls over there. Pick out which one you want and you can take it home. Pay for it, of course, but you can take that home. Now, when I went over to that carpet, looked at those rolls, it was the last part on the roll. It was the remnant, isn't that right? But was it any different to the first part of the roll? Of course it wasn't, friends. It's the same roll of carpet. This is just the last part. At the end of the roll, it's called the remnant. Friends, the remnant church is to be the same as the first church, the apostolic church of Jesus Christ. But we are now just at the end of time. It's called the remnant. But its foundation, my friends, is exactly the same as it was back in the early church. The pillar and ground of the truth, Timothy was told. So friends, who is the remnant church? Does God have a remnant church? Is there a church that fits the identifying marks? Let's have a look at the identifying marks that we've gleaned in our study tonight. The identifying marks of the remnant church. The first one, it arose after 1798. The remnant church, friends, would arise to view after the year 1798 as the church emerges from the wilderness. The second identifying point is simply this, that this remnant church has to be what? It has to keep the commandments of God. The third point we've learnt so far is this. It has the testimony of Jesus, the gift of prophecy. In other words, it would have the gift of prophecy manifest in the church. The fourth point is this. It's a remnant. It's the same as the original apostolic message. It's a continuation of the same church. But it's just at the end of time giving the same message that God gave with the early church. Righteousness by faith through Jesus Christ. The Word of God as the foundation of our faith. The fifth point is this, that we've learnt so far, that this church preaches the everlasting gospel and the three angels' messages. God is raising up this church. He's gathering his people together to preach the everlasting gospel and the three angels' messages. Because the three angels' messages is a message that goes to the world to prepare them for the coming of Christ and to warn them against the dangers of Babylon. And the last point we've learned is this, that this church must have a presence in all the world. There will be two universal churches at the end. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and her daughters, and there will be the remnant church of God. Why must it have a presence in all the world? Simply because of this, friends. If you're going to preach a worldwide message, you must have a worldwide church. Isn't that right? Matthew 24, verse 14, Jesus said these famous words. He said, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come." At the end of time, this church, this remnant church, will preach the gospel of the kingdom, which is what gospel? The everlasting gospel. It'll be preached in the entire world as a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. Friends, this church must be a worldwide denomination. This must be a worldwide church taking a worldwide message to the world. You can't preach to the whole world unless you have a presence in all the world, friends. It must be a universal movement. God's remnant church will take this gospel to the world. You know, friends, as we look at this tonight, we have to ask ourselves a question at this point. Is there a church in our world right now tonight that fits these identifying marks? Or is this church still to arise? You know, friends, if you're going to look at this and study into it, you're going to discover, as I have discovered in the past, that there is only one church in the world that meets these identifying marks, these 7 or 6 identifying marks. And I'm not going to tell you who that church is. I'm going to allow the false church to tell you who the true church is, who they believe the true church is. You see, back in the late 1800s, something very interesting took place. The Roman Catholic Church put out a document called Rome's Challenge. Rome's Challenge. The little booklet, Rome's Challenge, was a challenge to the Protestant denominations of the world. They were saying to the Protestant churches of the world, you guys are saying to us, sola scriptura, the Bible and the Bible only as the rule of our faith, and yet you're hanging on to all of our doctrines. In other words, you're still drinking from our cup. And in Rome's challenge, as they challenged the Protestant world, either to come back to Rome or to go to the Bible and the Bible alone, they tell you in Rome's challenge what church they believe is the only true church following the Bible and the Bible alone. In Rome's challenge, they tell you that the Seventh-day, this is the Catholic Church speaking, that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the only true Protestant church because they are the only ones that follow the Bible and the Bible alone. The rest, they say, are still hanging on to Catholic doctrines. And friends, we've seen so far tonight, that means they are still daughters of Babylon. You may be halfway out, drinking half the cup of God and half the cup of Babylon, but friends, it still classes you as a daughter of Babylon. In 1995, there was an interesting statement coming out from the Catholic Church. It said this. It says, perhaps the boldest thing, the most revolutionary change the church ever did, happened in the first century. The holy day, the Sabbath, was changed from Saturday to Sunday, not from any directions noted in the Scriptures, but from the church's sense of its own power. Notice what it goes on to say now. People who think that the Scriptures should be the sole authority should logically become Seventh-day Adventists and keep Saturday holy. Friends, they are saying to the Protestant world and to the world at large, if you want to be a Protestant, if you want to go back to the Bible and the Bible only, you must logically go and join the Seventh-day Adventist Church because they're the only ones that hold to the Bible and the Bible only as their rule of faith. The other churches all have some sort of wine of Babylon as a doctrine, as a teaching in their church. It is only the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they're saying, not me friends, they're saying that holds to the Word of God and the Word of God only. But is the Seventh-day Adventist Church the remnant church of God? Remember, friends, as I'm talking here tonight, I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about a system. There's good and bad people in every single church, including the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Don't expect to go to a church that's got Seventh-day Adventists on the front door and expect perfection. Expect it to be filled with a bunch of sinners, as all other churches are. All the churches have their good and their bad. We're talking about a foundational system, a belief system, the pillar and the ground of truth, which has to be the foundation of the church of God. Outside of that, it cannot be the church of God. And there are many great churches out there doing many great works, but sadly, they're still drinking in many ways from the cup of Babylon. But is the Seventh-day Adventist Church the true church? I believe, from my own study and in my own investigation, that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the remnant church of Bible prophecy. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, I believe, from my study and investigation on this subject, is the remnant church of Bible prophecy. Are they a better church? No. Are they holier? Absolutely not. Are they the only ones going to be saved? Absolutely not. Is it a better organisation? No. Is it a perfect church? Absolutely not, friends. Well, why do I say that it is the remnant church of God? It's because the message and truth that they hold. There are three reasons why I would say it's the remnant church of God. The first is that the Catholic Church says it's the only one following the Bible and the Bible only. Secondly, it's the only church that fits the identifying marks. And thirdly, it's because the message that they preach. It's the message that they preach that makes the foundation of the church. It's the pillar and the ground of truth. And friends, the reason why I preach up here night after night is not because I get paid from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because I don't. I don't get paid 1 cent to preach this. There's nothing in this for me. There's no backhand, there's no bonuses. But I preach this message night after night because as I've studied, as I've searched the Word of God, I have found it's the true message. It is the truth, friend. It is the pillar and ground of the truth. Remember, we started by saying that little saying, as an eternal principle, you do not go to the church to find the truth. You go to the Bible to find the truth. And when you find the truth, you look for a church that teaches the truth. I want to share with you for a few moments my own personal testimony. You see, friends, I was not brought up as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. I was not brought up as a Bible-believing Sabbath Christian. I was brought up in a lovely Roman Catholic home. I went to Catholic school. Like most Catholics, I was baptised as an infant. I attended Mass on Sundays. I believed in purgatory and immortality of the soul and church images and following the Pope's beliefs. I was taught to be an altar boy when I was at primary school. But something, friends, was tugging at my heart. Something was spiritually missing in my life. And deep within my heart, and I believe there's many out there tonight, deep within their heart, they're longing for truth. They're longing for the answers that make sense. In my late teenage years, I began to study the Bible. I began looking for those answers. And the more I studied, the more I was convinced by God and God's Word that He was leading me to accept all of His truth. The issue simply boiled down to this, friends. Would I accept a church based on man's ideas, or would I accept the divinely established movement of God based on the Bible? And as I began looking at different denominations, as I studied all these different denominations, I came back to the point that they were all drinking from the wine of Babylon except for that one, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It is, my friends, the remnant church of Bible prophecy. And that may sound arrogant or proud. I don't mean to be arrogant or proud, but I do mean to tell you what I believe is the truth tonight. Because the evidence, my friends, is there. God has His people all through the denominations. But friends, there's a call of God tonight to come out of Babylon, to come out of confusion, to take a hold of the cup of salvation and drink all of it, not half. Let's look at those identifying marks one more time and see if they fit the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The first identifying mark was this. It would arise after 1798. And friends, that's exactly what took place. After the year 1798, in the year 1863, we find the Seventh-day Adventist Church come to view. This remnant church must keep the commandments of God. Friends, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the only, underscore these words, friends, it is the only worldwide denomination that keeps all the commandments of God. It's the only one. There are many other denominations that keep Saturday as their Sabbath. They're minority organisations. They're not worldwide organisations. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, my friends, is the only worldwide denomination that keeps the commandments of God. All of them, not 9, 10. The third point was that this church has the testimony of Jesus, the gift of prophecy. Many churches in our land today claim to have the gift of prophecy. They may well do, I don't know. You must test the prophets, the Bible says. But the SDA Church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, does have the gift of prophecy in it. Identifying mark number 4, that this remnant church was the same as the original apostolic church message. And friends, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the exact same message. It's the Bible and the Bible alone, not the traditions of men. The remnant will teach the same church message as the early apostolic church taught. It will agree, all its teachings will agree with the Bible. Identifying mark number 5, we learned that this church preaches the everlasting gospel and the 3 angels' messages. You know, friends, as I speak here right now tonight, this point knocks out every denomination on the face of the earth except the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The only church on the face of this earth that preaches the 3 angels' messages and the everlasting gospel contained in those 3 angels' messages. The only one, friends, is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The only church that's calling back to obedience to the law of God and the Sabbath commandment that's been trodden underfoot is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The only church that teaches that the hour of God's judgment has begun, as we learnt last night in 1844, is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's a call to come back to God, to obedience to God. This church is giving that message, to leave the false doctrines of Babylon and the false teachings of Babylon. Friends, the only church tonight that preaches the 3rd angel's message, warning the world who the Antichrist power is, as difficult as that can be at times, is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The only church that is preaching to the world right now today that Sunday is the mark of the beast is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The sad part is, friends, if you go back about 100 years, every Protestant denomination taught that the Antichrist of Bible prophecy was the Roman Catholic system. Every denomination. 100 years later, today, where we live, only one church teaches that the Antichrist of Bible prophecy is the Roman Catholic system. The rest have become drunk with the false teachings and the false wine of Babylon, false prophetic interpretations, looking over to Israel, waiting for the Messiah, for the temple to be rebuilt and the Antichrist to appear over there. Friends, it comes directly from the Roman Catholic system. In the year 1590, Francisco Ribera began the futuristic theory of the Antichrist. And right through to today, the Protestant churches have all taken it on board, and nobody has a clue who the Antichrist is anymore. Nobody, friends. Nobody has a clue who the Antichrist is anymore because they've been drinking from the wrong cup. But friends, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is still giving that message. It's still giving the 3rd angel's message, identifying who the Antichrist power is of Bible prophecy. And the last point was that this church must have a presence in all the world. Friends, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a presence. It's well established in the entire world. It's taking that great 3 angels' messages right now tonight, right through to the entire world. Thousands upon thousands are responding to the message of God. Thousands upon thousands are coming out of Babylon, and they are committing themselves not so much to a church or a church building or a denomination, but to the truth, friend. But to the truth. And they're allowing that truth to come into their lives, into their hearts, to transform them. And they're sharing that truth with others. And friends, I want to give you a small glimpse before we close tonight. A small glimpse at the force working in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The Seventh-day Adventist Church right now tonight has become the fastest growing worldwide Christian church today. Today there is an average of 5 new congregations opening daily. There is an average of 3,000 people being added to the church each day as we speak. There are over 20 million people that now worship in Adventist churches worldwide. The Adventists run hundreds of schools, health centres, hospitals, printing houses, radio and television stations around the world. Friends, that message tonight that I've been preaching to you over the last 12 lectures is going to the world. And the big question is this: what will you do with that message? I know tonight that many of you are deeply challenged. You're deeply challenged, thinking in your mind and your heart, what do I do with this message I've heard tonight? How can I leave my church, my family, my friends? Everybody's there. I was born in that church. How can I change my worship style? How can I change from Sunday to Sabbath? How can I change all my belief system? Friends, I encourage you to change one step at a time. Tonight, friends, God has a people. He loves those people. He calls them out of Babylon. He says they're in Babylon, but He's calling them out into the remnant church to take a stand with the people of God in these last days. There will be two universal movements at the end of time. Mystery Babylon the Great and her daughters, and there will be the remnant church of God. Friends, God is calling to our hearts and our minds tonight. In Revelation chapter 18 verse 4, God is speaking to each one of us, and He says, I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people. Friends, I want to encourage you tonight. I want to plead with you tonight to commit your life to Jesus Christ. Will you accept the Bible and the religion of the Bible, or will you accept the traditions of men? Tonight, I want to challenge you, friend, to commit your life to Jesus Christ, to commit your life to His Word, to commit your life to taking into your life the three angels' messages and being prepared for the second coming of Christ. And if God's speaking to your heart tonight, friends, to come out of Babylon and you want to come into the remnant church, friends, the doors will be wide open. The arms will be outstretched to welcome you into that church. And friends, God needs you tonight. God needs you to be part of that end-time army to take that message to the ends of the earth, that Jesus Christ may come. May God bless you. May God lead you. May God empower you. May God strengthen you in your walk with Him and your decision to follow Jesus Christ all the way. May God bless you, and good night.